Hey everyone, it's Alex. In today's video, I'll be showing you how to use, install, and the basics to HTSL. Let me push up my glasses here because HTSL is a housing text scripting language that allows you to turn the housing actions that you use in functions or NPCs, whatever, into readable and writable actual text in Notepad or something that you can share with others, and allows you to edit and import into your house. In my opinion, it's a lot easier than using the actual housing menus, as that can be annoying and hard to read and look at. And I'm just going to be showing you how to use that in today's video. Some people have been asking, some people don't care. But whatever, we're just going to get right into it. So to start, you're going to need chat triggers. Now I have a link in the description to all the links that are shown in this video. But chat triggers at the moment is a mod mainly used for 1.8.9, meaning you are going to need Forge installed. So whether you use a Forge client such as Feather, or you just have basic Forge, I'm not going to show you how to install Forge as well as just mods in general. The idea with this video is that you know how to install mods, so if you don't, look up how do I install mods for 1.8.9 or whatever. With that out the way, hopefully you have chat triggers installed. If you do, if you install it, go back in game, do /CT, and it should display this text here. If it doesn't, you installed it wrong. Now into the next step, I recommend having Visual Studio Code. Now I'll show you some add-ons you can get to Visual Studio Code to make coding in HTSL a lot easier. However, it's completely optional. You do not need Visual Studio Code. Another example is Notepad++, which is just the default Notepad on Windows, but just a bit improved. But as you can see, I have HTSL opened in normal Notepad on Windows 11, as well as in Notepad++. Both work, but I don't recommend it. I recommend Visual Studio Code. Next, this is a requirement. You're going to need HTSL, pretty obviously. Go to the GitHub page and the link in the description. It shows you a bit on how to install it, but I'm going to show you in this video. Go to the Releases tab, and once you're in here, find the latest version, and find the zip file here, htsl.zip. Click on this to download it, and it'll start downloading. Go to wherever you download it. By default, it'll probably be your downloads folder, and here it is, htsl.zip. Whether you do this now or later, I'm going to do it now. I'm going to right click and go to extract all. If I have WinRAR, then I'm going to go to WinRAR and go to extract to HTSL / it says. This will just turn it into a folder, and if we open this up, there's a bunch of files in here. Just ignore that this is the code for HTSL. We're going to go back to our downloads folder. We no longer need this zip file. I'm going to delete it. And now we have this HTSL folder. Going back in game, assuming you have chat triggers installed, do /CT files, and this file explorer tab will open. Now things will be a little bit different. I have a few, my chat triggers is a little bit edited, but go inside your modules folder, and you will have a lot less things in here, hopefully. I have a lot of stuff in here. I should probably clean this up. But we're going to go back to our downloads folder where we have HTSL and drag this file into here. And just drop it. I already did that. It's right here, so I don't need to do that for the sake of this tutorial. And from there, go ahead and close out of your downloads folder. We don't need that anymore, but I would just keep this open for now. Go back in game, do /CT reload. Once again, I have a lot of things here that's going to show up. You can just ignore it. But the important thing now is if we do /HTSL, then a bunch of commands and messages will show up. Before we get started with coding and actually doing stuff in HTSL, we're going to do /HTSL Config, and this will open up a config menu. There's two tabs here, miscellaneous and action/items. Going to miscellaneous real quick. This is the GUI cooldown. It says it right here, the amount of cooldown between clicking an item and a GUI. I'm pretty sure this is in ticks, correct me if I'm wrong, but if your ping is high, you have bad connection to Hypixel, try turning these values up. Otherwise, by default, you should be fine. Okay, boring stuff out of the way, we can finally get into the actual coding in HTSL. So back to the folder I mentioned before, go ahead and open up HTSL. Now yours will look a tiny bit different from mine. You will not have this ignore folder. You will have this imports folder. So let's go inside that. And I have some things in here for the tutorial, but I want to show you how you would make a new HTSL file. Right click, go down to new, and go to text document. Now this will be different if you're not on Windows 11. I'm going to completely remove the entire name from this and call this whatever I want. I'm going to call it test.htsl. If this shows up, click on yes. And if you're having issues where it doesn't change and it's not an HTSL file, go to view up here, go to show, and turn on file name extensions. This should have a check next to it. Now, in the beginning, I showed you Visual Studio Code, Notepad++, or just Notepad. Go ahead and open up this file in whatever you want. So I'm going to use Visual Studio Code. We could also use Notepad or Notepad++. Opening test.htsl here, I have this in Visual Studio Code. And now we can get started on coding. Real quick, if you are in Buster Brown's Discord server, you're welcome for the free advertisement. Then he has this file called HTSL Plus, I suppose is what it's called. If you want to go to the GitHub page and download this, You can go back to Visual Studio Code, go to Extensions, click on this 3 dots, and install from VSIX, and click on that file. Then the extension will automatically color stuff in HTSL. So if I were to use stat gold, increase 1, then it's kind of colorful in certain places, and there's like autofilling, as you can see, stuff like that. It's a little bit outdated and doesn't work 100% of the time, but it is still useful if you decide to use Visual Studio Code. Okay, we can finally get into coding now. I know that took a long time. I'm sorry, but here we go. Okay, there will be another link in the description to the HTSL guide. This is on the Hypixel forums. Here is where Buster, the maker of HTSL, by the way, if I didn't say that already, posted information about the module, as well as documentation on how to use it. Now quickly, if you've never programmed or used a coding language before, then the proper way to write what you want the program to do is by using the correct syntax, whatever you want to say. I'm going to get made fun of either way I say it. But it's important to use the proper ones, because if you don't, HTSL will throw an error and it will hate you. And we don't want it to hate you. If you want to read this, go ahead, but you're not needed to, because I am showing you in this video. So here's a list of all the actions in housing, as well as the proper syntax. I'm just going to say both, as well as the description about it here. Zooming in real quick. As an example, here is how the apply inventory layout action would work. You would do apply layout, no space here, but using a capital L, and then in quotes, the layout name. Another example is apply potion effect. We would use apply potion, no space, capital P for potion. In quotes, the potion name, for example, speed. The first parameter, or I guess the second, is 100 in the example. This would be for 100 seconds. The next parameter is 3. This is the level. So level 3. And then the last is true. Now this can be replaced with false, so true or false. And this is the setting when you apply a potion effect to whether you want overriding existing effects. There's a lot else here, and we're going to go over a few of them, not all of them, as most of them are very self-explanatory. And once again, a link to this will be in the description. Okay, so let's get started. So what do we want to code first? Well, as a introduction to HTSL, or I guess a starter, I'm going to go over how you can just create a NPC. Then when you right click, it gives you some gold stat, as well as maybe displays a title or sends a chat message. So first we wanted to increase our gold. So let's go back to the guide and find where we want to change player stat. So here it is right here, change player stat. Now the syntax or syntax example is stat kills increment 1. Let's go back to Visual Studio Code and write that. So we want our stat gold to increase by, let's say 10. We're going to do stat, and this automatically would mean the player stat. In quotes, we're going to put gold. Now, there's a few options here. We can either use increment or inc. Now, personally, I like inc. However, I'm pretty sure you can also use plus equals, but we're going to stick to inc. And the amount, we'll say 10. Another thing we'll do here is send a chat message. Now, we could go back and look at how to send a chat message. However, I have memorized this, which you'll probably do after using HTSL for a while. We're going to write chat, which is the proper way to do it. Space, and then in quotes, the message we want to send. So we can use some color codes here. We're going to use and C for red and say, you were just given 10 gold. Now let's do one final thing. We're going to play a sound. Now sounds is a little bit complex in HTSL. The correct syntax or syntax is sound space, and then in quotes, the sound ID. I'll have a link in the description to this website. It includes a bunch of sound IDs. For this tutorial specifically, we're going to use the anvil land sound. Some of these are from later versions of Minecraft, which means I don't think they will work in 1.8.9, which is what housing is based on. But what you're going to do is just try to match up the sound that you want to the ID here. For example, if you want to use the anvil land sound, then we can find here it's block.anvil.land. We're going to copy this and go back to Visual Studio Code and just paste this in the quotes. Now something you will just memorize, but I will go back into the documentation to show you. If we find the play sound action, you can see that it's sound, the name like I said, and then it's the volume, pitch, as well as the location. Volume by default is 0.7 and pitch by default is 1. And invoker's location is the player's location. That confuses a lot of people, so I'll explain it right now. Invoker's location is just the player's coordinates at where they are at that moment. So let's go back. We want the volume to be 0.7. This could be whatever you want. That's just default. We'll do the pitch at 1.5, so it's a little bit higher pitch. And for the location, we can use invokers _location. And fingers crossed I spelled that right. Now, let's say we didn't want to use invoker's location. Let's say we wanted to use custom location or something else. We can scroll down to the locations, I guess, subcategory here, and we have 4 options. We have house spawn, current location, invoker's location, and custom coordinates. So if you want the house spawn, then just replace invoker's location with house spawn. If you want current location, which is the location you stand while you import it, then change it to current location. If you want to keep it as invoker's location, that's fine. But if you want to use a custom coordinate, I will show you right now. We're going to go back and change this to custom coordinate, I think is what it was. Oh, it's coordinates. Also important that you do spell it right, as once again, HTSL will throw an error. And because we're using custom coordinates, it's going to want another parameter, which is the coordinates we will use. Let's say it's 50, 102, and 69. So that means that the Anvil LAN location will play at these coordinates. I don't want to use custom coordinates though, I just want to use invoker's location. So when the player clicks it, then it'll just be for the player. We're going to save this, we're going to do Control S, and now we'll go back in game. All right, so we want this to be an NPC, so let's grab an NPC and just place it down. We'll change the name just so we know, give 10 gold, and we can also customize the NPC however you want. I'm not going to show you how to do that in today's tutorial. If we go to the actions, now I have housing editor installed, so this is why this is here, but we're going to want to ignore that and go up to import HTSL. We're going to enter the file name here. So the file name is test.htsl. We only need to enter test, and now we can import HTSL. Click on this button, and it'll automatically go through the entire file and import what we wrote accordingly, and there we go. Super quick, and as you can see, super quick because there wasn't much there. And now if we right click on the NPC, now hopefully you could hear it, but it did play the Anvil LAN sound. The stat on the scoreboard gold was increased to 10, and the chat message in chat said you were just given 10 gold. We can spam this, it'll play the sound over and over, it'll send the chat message over and over, and our gold will increase. Okay, awesome. So now I'm going to show you, so now we're going to get into a bit more complex stuff. If I went over every single thing here, then it would take a while, but just know that if you want to use a certain action, then you can go here, and let's say we wanted to use the fail parkour action. I don't know anyone that uses this, but the correct way to use it is fail parkour, and then fail parkour I'm pretty sure has a reason that gets printed out in chat to the player, so in quotes you can say that reason. One more example, if we want to use the kill player action, then it looks like the syntax, I'm just going to say both, is just kill. One more because I want to. If we want to set the player's game mode, we can use game mode, and then in the quotes, either creative, survival, or adventure, as those are the 3 options available in housing. Okay, hopefully you have a good understanding about how just the one-line actions work. Some are a bit more confusing than others, so it does require a bit of playing with just to fully understand. If I went over every action here and everything about it, it would probably take a while. And I would like this video to be semi-short, but I will go over some a bit more complex actions like give item a little bit later. Now next we're going to go over conditions and conditionals. Okay, so we're going to move on to conditionals now. Conditionals is probably one of the most important things about HTSL and housing in general. Conditionals are a bit more complex, but once you get them down, they're very easy. We're going to go back in here, and I'm just going to remove all the code in here, and we're going to replace this with instead of giving you gold, we're going to have it test to see how much gold you have, and then do an action based off that. Okay, so we're going to start by writing if, and then open parenthesis, close parenthesis. We're going to go back to those parentheses in a minute. But to finish off the conditional, we will do open bracket, close bracket, and then enter it out so it formats like this. Any code between these brackets is what will run in the if actions in a conditional. If we want to run actions in the else, then we would add else to the end of this bracket, the last bracket, have more brackets, and enter it so we have a few more lines. Now, hopefully you got that. I probably said brackets there like 20 times. But real quick, just again, over the formatting, we have if, and then parentheses, open bracket, close bracket. What's inside these brackets will be ran in the if actions. And if we want to have something in the else actions, which is optional, we actually don't need that. But if we do, we would have else, and then open bracket, close bracket, and anything in between these will run in the else actions. Now, as for the conditional, if we go back onto the HTSL guide, then here's a list of all the possible conditions you can use. Specifically, I'm going to be showing you how to test if gold is greater than a specific amount. So here we go, player stat requirement. So player stat requirement, the example is stat kills is greater than or equal to 10. Now this goes into a bit more detail below, but you're watching this video, so I'm not going to go down to that and just show you in the video instead. So there's the example. Now I'm going to show you how you would actually do that for your own. So inside the parentheses, we're going to say stat gold is greater than or equal to, we'll do 15. So we're going to check if the player stat gold is greater than or equal to 15, which if it is in the if actions, we're going to set stat gold. We're going to decrease, so decrease is dec. And we're going to have the value, just to keep it consistent, we're going to use 15. So if the gold is greater than 15, then we're going to remove 15, and then we'll do something else in a minute. Now otherwise, in the else actions, we're going to send a chat message that says, which we learned how to do before, that says in red, hey, you don't have enough gold. And we're going to use some placeholders here. If we do such placeholders in housing, then it shows up with a huge list of the placeholders we can use. We're going to find the placeholder to shows our team stat. I can never find it in here. Oh, it's always at the bottom. It's parentheses stat dot player slash and then the key and then end parentheses. Key is to be replaced by the stat name. So we'll send another chat message that says you have and then in parentheses stat dot player slash gold. So you have, and then this will replace with the player's gold, and we'll say gold. You need 15 gold. Let's save this and just import what we have so far, just so you could see what it does. In recap, this should check if our gold is greater than 15, which if it is, we'll just decrease the gold, and we'll actually send a message that says, in green, using and a, hooray. Otherwise, we'll send a chat message saying that they don't have enough gold, and then on the next line, tell them how much gold they have and say to them that they need 15 gold. We're going to save this, go back in game, and we're going to edit this NPC. We're going to right click to remove all the actions, and the name is the exact same, so we'll just import HTSL. Let it do its thing and import. And once it imported successfully, we should now be able to right click. It says hooray, and we removed 15 from our stat, or our gold stat. We'll spam this until we run out of gold to where we can test the else actions. So we can do it here. We have 0 gold, and if we right click again, it says, hey, you don't have enough gold. You have 0 gold. You need 15 gold. Okay, so awesome. We made a conditional, and that works perfectly fine. I'm going to be showing you the small things that you can change to conditionals, such as if we go into the NPC right now, if we go into the conditional, we have an option for match any condition, as well as the ability to add more conditionals. To add more conditionals, we can add a comma and then just add whatever we want here. Taking a look at the conditionals list, we can see a bunch of stuff here. Maybe we'll check to see if they are currently flying, so the syntax or syntax is flying, which we'll actually just copy and paste here. So now we'll check if they have 15 gold as well as that they are flying. What if we want to match any condition? Like if we go back, there is a match any condition, which makes it so if any of the conditions in the conditions are true, then it will run the if actions. Otherwise, continue with the else actions. To do that, after the if, but before the parentheses, we can just add or. It's that simple. And that's a basic guide on how conditions work. Of course, there's other conditions as well as other actions we can use. But once again, if I went over every single one, then that would make this video very long. Okay, so one of the more complex things about HTSL is that the use of items. Unlike housing editor or just using default housing in like the menus in game, HTSL works a little bit differently. I quickly created this sword. If we hover over it, you can see that it's called the super sword with a lore that says hello world and it's unbreakable. Now if we want to use this sword in our HTSL code, maybe they have to purchase it with gold, or maybe it just gives it to them when they right click, or maybe it checks to see if they have that item before doing certain actions. Whatever it is, we're going to want to do the command HTSL and save item, followed by the name of the item. I'm going to call this super sword with no space. And as you can see, saved item to supersword.json. If we go to files where our imports are, you can see that supersword.json has appeared, and now we can use it. So let's go back to how we had it before, where we check if our gold is greater than or equal to 15. And instead of printing out hooray in chat, let's have it give them the item. So because this is a one-line action, we don't need to look in conditionals. We need to look up here to our one-line actions. We're going to find where it says give item. Here it is. And as you can see here, it says that it gives the player an item based on its MPT data stored in the JSON file. This true parameter is whether you want them to allow for multiple. The first slot is whether you want it to go to the first available slot in the inventory. And the false here is if you wanted to replace that slot. So we're just going to replace the hooray chat message to give item, followed by the item file name. So it's called super sword, so we're going to type that in. The next parameter, if we go back real quick, is whether we want to allow multiple. We're going to say true, meaning they can have as many as they want. For first slot, if we were to take a look at the default housing give item action, you can see inventory slot, first slot, it's referring to this slot here, first slot. But if you wanted to use a specific slot here, then instead of having it say first slot, then you would replace this to hand slot or a number, which I'm pretty sure, as you can see here, manual slot 0, you would just put the number 0. If we wanted right here, we would put the number 22. Hey, I was wrong. I just want to let you know, instead of using the number 22, you would just type in quotes, inventory slot 14 if we were to use this slot. I'm editing this right now. I realized I did it wrong. I just want to let you know. Now I want to just be given to the first slot. So first slot, the first slot available. And if we want to replace the item, which is the next parameter, we're going to say false. Okay, let's save this. Actually, first, we're going to just show how you would do that in the conditions. So we're going to add another conditional inside here. We're not going to need any else actions. We're going to check if they have. We're going to check the conditional for checking if the player has an item. We'll go back to conditions here and we'll find has item. We're going to copy and paste just the example here just to make it easier on us. And we're just going to replace it manually. So we're going to check if the player has the item. We're going to replace stone with super sword. Check the metadata of the item, meaning that the MPT data matches. We're going to check if they have this in their inventory. Inventory. And any amount of this item. Which, if they do have it, then we'll let them know. We'll send a chat message in red. You already have a super sword. And we'll use the exit action just by putting exit, which will stop the rest of the code from running. Now we'll save this and we'll go back in game. Right click on our NPC, delete the current actions that we have, and import test. If everything worked correctly, then it should have imported no problems. At the moment of recording this video, there is this message in chat saying that it failed to load, 2 errors canceled by user. This can be ignored. Sometimes it says some other stuff, which if it did say other stuff, that means there was an actual error. But this looks like there's just an error with HTSL, and Buster will most likely fix this in a future update. So maybe if you're watching this, this is not happening to you. But now, we're going to just remove these super swords from our inventory. We're going to edit player stat, Alex Royer, gold, set 999, just so we can test this. We'll right click, and as you can see, we got 15 gold removed. We were given our super sword, and if we were to click again, then it says you already have a super sword because we already have one. Before we wrap up this video, I'm going to go over some examples, as well as HTSL's custom action, if we scroll down here, called GOTO. So if you're like me, I like to keep my HTSL files organized, so I have different folders for every house that I'm working on. For the tutorial, I've created a file called tutorial, and if we open this up, we have a basic shop.htsl file. If we wanted to import this into our game, then it's super easy. We're going to go back to the MPC, and instead of just writing the file name, we're going to rewrite the folder that it's in, so tutorial, followed by a slash, and now everything past this slash would be anything inside the tutorial folder. So now we would write basic shop. And I'm not going to import it because I don't see a need to. An example of how player IDs would work in HTSL. I have this file here called playerid.htsl. Now this would be in the join event, where we would check if the stat player ID is equal to 0, which we would increase global stat, which is something we didn't go over in the tutorial, but it's very similar to a player stat. We're just using global stat. We increase the global stat player IDs by 1. A little bit of a different way of using it. Personally, I would do inc but it looks like increment works fine like this. Then we would set the player ID player stat, so set that to the global stat player ID. So if we put a placeholder in quotes, then we can use placeholders. We do some other stuff like set the global stat temp to 1, as well as set a global stat ID to broadcast to the player's ID, and trigger a function join quit for all players. Now true is for all players, false is just for themselves. Part of the syntax, which you would see on the guide. And finally, we're going to go over the GOTO action to wrap up the tutorial. If we remove all the code here, an example of where this would be used is if we had a very big script that requires the code to be separated into 2 different functions or whatever you want. The limit for the amount of conditionals you can have in a function is 15. So let's say we had a bunch of conditionals. If I just do this, just pretend there's a bunch of code in here. If we had like 15, then we couldn't import anymore and we'd have to separate it to another function. So we could trigger the function, we trigger a function, function2, and instead of having a separate file for that function, we can write GOTO function, function2. And now any code past this will be applied to function2. As an example, I wrote some code that basically says chat that chats to the player I'm running from function 1. It'll then trigger the function, function 2. It'll then go to the code in function 2 and add a chat action that says I'm running from function 2. And to show you, I created 2 functions, function 1 and function 2. And if we go inside function 1 and import our test HTSL file, assuming that we did save, which we did, if we import this, then it'll import the chat action, then import the trigger function, and then go to function 2 and add the code there. We can just check to see there is code in function number 1, triggers the function, function 2, and in function number 2, we have the message that says I'm running from function 2. If we go to our MPC and just have it trigger the function, function 1, we can right click, and as you can see, I'm running from function 1, and then it says I'm running from function 2. So yeah, a really cool feature in HTSL that's super useful if you have a big code or script, I guess you could say. But yeah, that's going to wrap it up with today's video. There's still a bit more things to HTSL that are a bit more complex. Some actions work a little bit differently to others, and I didn't go over all of them, so you might be a little confused. Refer to the HTSL guide if you have any questions. But I'll link to the description to Buster's server where you can directly ask for HTSL help, as well as mine, which you can ask there too. It's the Housing Hub. But yeah, that's going to end off this video. If you watched the entire thing, I do appreciate it. But yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.